welcome to the June edition of tinyML Trailblazers series. So this is the place where every month you meet tinyML pioneers, people who drive this field of energy efficient compute forward. And today we are very fortunate to have a special guest. Anders Hardebring is joining us from Sweden. Anders is a co-founder and CEO of Imagimob. And as you may know, Imagimob was acquired recently by Infineon, and this will be part of the story today. And the goal for this series is really to share the knowledge, to share the ideas, and to share how success stories built in the tinyML world. Before we start, it is my pleasure to acknowledge our strategic partner and sponsors. It's AZIP, Analog Devices, Adreno, ARM, BrainChip, Imagimob, IBM, Gravity, Green Wave Technologies, Edge Impulse, Infineon, Innoterra, Microsoft, Nota.ai, NXP, Poland Technologies, Kixo, Qualcomm, Renaissance, Schneider Electric, SensiML, Sony, Silicon Labs, ST Microelectronics, Synaptics, and Syntient. As you know, tinyML communities are growing really fast. We are around 15,000 people in 47 groups in 40 countries. This morning we'll discuss one more group, starting a group in Egypt that will be 48 in 40 countries. And the online communities like LinkedIn communities are growing with over 10,000 people there. Our YouTube channel is very active with close to 10,000 subscribers and close to 600 videos. And by the way, this video is also going to be recorded and will be presented there as well this week. In terms of in-person events, the next opportunity to meet will be in Amsterdam. In about 2 weeks, tinyML Foundation is going to host tinyML Europe, Middle East, and Africa Innovation Forum. It's going to be an in-person event, great venue, great program. So you can still register and attend this event. And the program is on the website. And at this point, let me introduce our host. Although the host, Chris Rowen, does not need to have an introduction to this audience. Chris has been very active in the tinyML community, in the high-tech community in general, in the startup community. He has a lot of success stories of his own as a co-founder of several companies and CEO of several companies. The most recent one was Bubble Labs that was acquired by Cisco in 2020. I think that was one of the first tinyML acquisitions in this space. And since then, Chris leads ML AI group at Cisco. And before that, he's done several more. One of the most notable one is Tensilica that was also acquired a while ago, and Chris has many recognitions and professional awards, and it is a pleasure to have Chris as our host. Thank you, Chris, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Evgeny. And I have the great pleasure of introducing Anders. Anders Hardebring is the CEO and co-founder of Imagimob. He is really a veteran in leading and developing early stage companies in the technology sector. And he's worked with a range of his companies, taking them from startup through to sometimes very large exits. He is based in Sweden, and he is really here to tell us the story about Imagimob, how it got started, what it does, where it's going now as it goes through a transition with Infineon, and to reflect, I hope, over the course of this next hour on what are some of the key ingredients that make a successful startup. How do you think about the marketplace? How do you think about the customers? What's the role that the technology plays in connecting with a real world problem? So, Anders, welcome.
Thank you so much, Chris.
So let's start with just what is the mission of Imagimob? What do you do? What are you trying to accomplish? What do customers come to Imagimob to do?
Well, first of all, we are a pioneer in tinyML. We actually had our first projects in 2015. We worked with a lot of big companies in the couple of years. We realized we had real revenues. We had a lot of big customers. We realized we had a business model that didn't scale. It was basically, we had some internal tools, but the revenue was mainly consulting revenues. And we realized this will never scale. So we decided in 2019 to take all this experience and expertise we have gained in these projects to develop our own platform, which is called Imagimob AI. And that was launched 2020 in October.
Mm-hmm.
And what the platform does is that it allows users to develop their own machine learning models. It's deep learning. So they can build a model from scratch. They can collect data, build models, and then convert them to C code that they can deploy on different type of MCUs from like basically C code, so you can basically deploy it on any device. We also now in the last years also engaging in something we call ready to go models, which means that sometimes customers think it takes too long time to develop their own models. We also offer working on offering like a suite of ready to go models.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the choices that every startup faces, and certainly it must be the case for you, is this question of how horizontal versus vertical a product. Now, horizontal means really it's a set of tools and building blocks, and every industry and every customer will find sort of equal value in it. And something very vertical is saying, well, in this particular industrial segment, for this end application, we have all of the pieces you need to do a complete solution. Where in that continuum between completely horizontal and completely vertical do you find works for you?
So, I mean, the platform is, first of all, it's based on time series data. So that's kind of one boundary. And the platform in itself is horizontal in terms of time series data. But I think that was something we discussed very early on, and we realized we will never be able to sell a horizontal platform to the market. That will just be too difficult. So we have, since a couple of years, focused on a number of verticals. So we had worked with, for instance, we have worked with IMUs for fall detection. We have worked a lot with radars and gesture detection. So it's kind of a mix. The platform is horizontal, but we realize in terms of really reaching customers, we have to be vertical as well.
Yeah, right. And which verticals then do you see as the most appropriate, the most lucrative, the easiest to penetrate of all the possible verticals that are out there? Because, tinyML in its definition is pretty horizontal, yet, every customer is vertical in their own way. And you get to pick and choose where to lean into having a more complete solution, especially with the ready-to-go models.
Yeah. So we have seen, and we are seeing a lot of demand in the areas of health and safety, and that's also where we have been able to take applications to production, and that's also something that we have seen in the tinyML market. It's also in our first project, you do proof of concepts and you do demos. But we realized at some point that this will not really take us anywhere. We have to focus on customers that want to go to production, because otherwise the platform is just, it's just a toy. So for fall detection and health and safety, I would say that's our most important vertical.
Got it. And how has that focus, or at least that bias towards the health and safety applications, affected what you put into the package? In some cases you may say, well, it's a tool that is well suited for people with expertise in that area. That's kind of a pretty, I'd say, engineer focused offer. On the other hand, you could say, no, we've gathered, a terabyte of data from every possible sensor that's used in that space. And the asset is we have all the data. So they're different sources of advantage, sources of time to market acceleration or complexity reduction that you could find across having the models, having the data, having the integration environment, having a handle on, I don't know, regulatory and compliance issues. Where do you find that the greatest value to your customers comes? Which things must your customers bring, and which things can you bring to make their job easier?
I think this is where the ready-to-go models comes into play, because that's something we have talked to a lot of customers in Asia, for instance, and we say, we have a platform, and they say, we don't want a platform. We don't have any people that can operate the platform. We want to buy something from the shelf, off the shelf. Yeah. I think that's, if we take some of these, we have sound event applications, sound event detection applications. We have data. We have, and for fall detection, we have data sets that we own, and we can basically have a ready-to-go model that is, it will be very quickly to deploy it on an MCU. So I think.
So it sounds like.
I think at the moment, I think if you look at the tinyML market, I mean, the hardware is becoming better and better, and the tools. I mean, there are a number of different tools in the market, and I guess we all know who they are. I think the weak point at the moment is data.
Right. So it sounds like a ready-to-go model is not just a model that is ready to train, but a model that is trained in many cases. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So that implies that it's built around a particular sensor, because sensors vary so much. Yeah. So how much do you need to standardize on a certain class of sensors, or even specific sensor models or sensor units in order to do this? That is the model training transportable at all across different choices of sensors that you might have in the reference system?
I mean, if you look at fall detection, I'm sure we can use different IMUs from different vendors. So I think there you can use different accelerometers or IMUs from different vendors. If you look at, for instance, radar, we have worked with most radars in the market. They are very different. There is actually no way you can use what you have done for one vendor to the other. So I would say, if the ready-to-go model is a radar-based model, it's for a specific radar and for a specific data format, actually. Right.
Yeah.
So in that case, radar is like a complex source of data.
Yeah. Great. One of the recent events for Imagimob is now linking up with Infineon. Tell me some more about how that happened and what this means. What does Imagimob focus on going forward as part of this larger company?
Yeah, so if we take in 2022, we saw, you have seen there has we have seen that it was a wave of consolidation, and we also have seen in the projects that in order to build a really solid model, for instance, on accelerated hardware, we needed to work very closely with the hardware companies. So we saw that working closely with a hardware company would be important. So we actually decided around Christmas time that we would try to find a strategic partner in typically a hardware company. But before we really started to work on that, we were approached by Infineon. And I think from start, it was a very, very positive process. And I would say the process itself, we did it basically in 3 months. I think every day was effective. I think I think it was like a perfect process.
Oh, that's good.
And if looking ahead, I think we're only 3 weeks into the acquisition, and all details are not ironed out. But for instance, they are very strong in sensors. They're very strong in microphones, in radar, in CapSense, a lot of different sensors, and they're very strong in MCUs. And we have the platform, we have the ready-to-go models. So I think this is really something we will work on, to have like solutions that have a sensor, have an MCU, and a model that is kind of works with the sensors, work with the MCU, and that can be sold as a solution. I think that's and really to reduce the time to market for customers. I think that's a big area.
Mm-hmm.
And they are very strong in. They're also very strong in automotive. They're very strong in energy. They're very strong in power. So I think there can be a lot of different application areas as well.
Great. So let's go back and hear a bit more about your story. Mm-hmm. How did you come to get involved with Imagimob? How did your past history prepare you for this? What did you have to learn as part of Imagimob in order to reach customers and define strategy and build the right team?
So we founded the company in 2013. We said we're going to have a product company, but for the first 2 years we were basically consultants in sensors and firmware, and we did some indoor positioning projects. And to be honest, at that time, before this, I didn't have any experience from embedded. I've worked a lot in the telecom space, so I know mobile operators, I know SIM cards and building systems and stuff like that. Yeah. So right. I think the whole embedded world was kind of scary because I thought it was so complicated. Everything was so complicated.
Yeah, there were so many vendors and so many customers. Embedded is extremely distributed compared to telecom, where you've got 2 or 3 operators per country, and that's it.
Exactly. That's exactly my background. Selling to operators, you have 2 or 3 operators in every country. But one of the founders, he was like a strong, smart guy. So we started to play around with algorithms for accelerometers. So he came up with our own AI algorithm. And then quite early we had a project with a big Swedish company. Mm-hmm. And then we built actually a working solution it was with a chainsaw. So it was about understanding when the chainsaw, it got stuck, it can kick. And
right.
We built a solution that will detect this dangerous movement and shut off the chainsaw. So we had a working solution, and we actually wrote a report about this. This was 2015, and if you read it today, it's actually the definition of everything that is tinyML. And this was, really, really early. I would say it must be almost like a world's first. And we presented this report to this big company, and they said, "Yeah, guys, you have a lot of good ideas, but in this company, we don't do anything on the edge. Everything is in the clouds. So we didn't have a next project, but we
I don't know
realized,
if I want my chainsaw to have to get to the cloud in order to save my leg.
exactly. This is exactly our point. But we realized that we were onto something. So that, I think, that project with that big customer, even though they didn't continue, we realized we are onto something here. And I think this was before Edge AI was like a word, or tinyML was not invented. So from that on, we really worked with a lot of Swedish companies in this type of projects.
Got it. Got it. So along the way, for every entrepreneur, there's always some roadblock that you hit. There's some assumption that you made about the market. There's some effort that you invested in heavily, and you discover that's not working, or it's not working the way I expected. And at that point, you reassess and you go figure out what to do next. Sometimes you change the technology, sometimes you change the business model, sometimes you change the customer focus. There are lots of different tools for getting out of these traps. Do you have some example from the history of Imagimob where you really decided to take a new direction, or perhaps you were forced to take a new direction by just the imperative to build a strong business?
Yeah, so I think a lot of things happened in 2019 in the fall. So first of all, like I said, we invented our own algorithm, but then we were working on some projects, and we realized that this doesn't scale. We have to build our own tools for training, everything. So we actually, even though we had patents and stuff like that, we decided to go for deep learning. And actually in the fall of 2019, we did very, very well. We had a lot of big projects with ABB, Husqvarna, Assa Abloy, Verisure, Anticimex, Fleer, like big customers, big projects. But we realized that we were selling consultancy, and we realized, like I said before, what we're doing doesn't scale. So I think that was maybe, from a sales perspective, that was probably our best period. For these projects was maybe like between $50,000 and $100,000 each. But even though we were successful, we said, yeah, this will not scale. So that's why we make these two big decisions. First of all, we abandoned our own algorithm, which we had invested a lot in, and decided to go for deep learning. And we decided to develop our own platform, which was a big step because we didn't have so much. But what followed then was, a couple of months later, COVID hit us. And so I think we had 7 big projects. Every one of them was shut down. So that summer, we had 15 people, we had 0 revenues, the product was not ready, and we were running out of cash. So, this was
the nightmare that many of us went through at that time.
Yeah, and it was like a nightmare because I didn't really know where. I was really, really stressed at that point.
Yeah.
So I think that from October 19 to July 20, that was we did some very important decisions, and we also went through some really, really difficult times.
Yeah.
But in the fall, we managed we launched the product. We had some very important partnerships, and we managed to raise some new cash. So then we basically and that was basically our new journey with the platform, with deep learning, working with partners. So I think that was a very important and very difficult period for us.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I'm really curious about how you thought about selling, how much you were selling and marketing and developing business in Sweden, in Europe, or globally. How did that distribution of geographic focus evolve over time? And what do you find are the big trends geographically now in where your customers live?
So until 2020, I would say 95% of our customers were in Sweden, and but were basically, you know, all the biggest companies here. With the platform, everything changed. So I would say from that point, our customers are, I would say, international. We have a lot of users in Asia. Our most important partners are in the US. We also have a number of customers in the US. And my impression is that that's the impression I get, that US is ahead of Europe in terms of development. But in terms of customers now, it's kind of evenly spread. There's no Swedish focus any longer.
Yeah. Okay. And what for you have been the key ingredients in terms of finding the right people and finding the right mix of styles of people as the company has changed? Obviously, you know, moving from a company that's centered on consultancy just 4 years ago to now one that's selling and developing business internationally and building a platform must be a significant change. How has that affected your people? How has that affected who brings the most appropriate skills to the team?
Yeah, it really had an impact, because when we moved from projects to platform, a number of people actually left because they said, "Yeah, we want to do big projects. We don't want to sell a platform." So we at that time, some very good people left, but they didn't have exactly the right. Yeah, exactly like you said, they didn't have the right profile for the next step, basically. In terms of the digital, because this is like we have worked a lot with partners, with Texas Instruments, with Synaptics, Syntient. So it's been like a profile of business development, trying to understand how to work with them. And then we also worked on the digital side with, you know, digital marketing, doing conversions on the website and stuff like that. What we're doing now is that we actually, since the acquisition, we are in the process of, in the first step, to hire 10 people on the technical side, but also on the commercial side to even more streamline. I think one difference here is that we have never had a lot of cash. Cash has been a problem throughout the company's history, and which means that we've had a very we have had a small but very efficient team.
Right.
But we didn't have the luxury to kind of employ exactly the people we wanted, to be honest.
Yeah, interesting. So what does the future look like? And let me ask it in a couple of different ways. Obviously, being inside of Infineon means that the silicon platform that you're targeting is now probably more biased towards Infineon, just as a guess. But what are the new potentials you see, either because of changes in the market or changes in the technology, or big changes that come from having this close partnership with the silicon platform provider? What changes going forward? What do you see as the new opportunities that are being created by the wider acceptance of machine learning, or the greater availability of compute or changes in sensors? What are the things that are coming over the horizon that will be the next source of change for what you do?
So first of all, we are only 3 weeks into the acquisition, but
Yeah.
the idea is actually that Imagimob will continue to be an independent company, because there are a lot of different other sensor companies, also with other vendors of MCUs. I think what we have said so far, we can work with other hardware vendors as long as they're not competing with Infineon. But I think in reality, it will also be like a bandwidth discussion here, because they have a lot of sensors, they have a lot of MCUs, they have a lot of use cases. So I would think that the idea is for us to be open, independent, but I think the focus will be on use cases. I mean, they have a big customer base. They are very big in automotive. Yeah. I think we'll work with their sensors, their MCUs, and their use cases. That's my guess.
Yes. Are you aware of technology changes that you think are going to be particularly important? What are customers seeing as changes in what they need based on their emerging applications?
So I think what we see is that these AI accelerators, they're coming from more and more vendors. We believe they will be very important for the growth of tinyML, because they're so much more powerful. It will take some years before they're really big. I think that's a big change, because then you can do a lot more applications that you're currently doing in the cloud. You can do it on the edge. That's kind of a technology change. Then we also believe that we believe in the concept of ready-to-go models, because that will make it easier. It will go faster for customers.
Yeah. Now, the tinyML space really covers quite a broad range of applications and different kinds of devices. Its ideal device, in some sense, is something super low power, super tiny, usually battery operated. And of course, tinyML is being used in those tiny battery operated sorts of environments. But I think the reality is broader than that people who are building embedded machine learning aren't all saying, well, let's look at the world below 1 milliwatt of power. What do you see in terms of the span of applications? How much is in this truly low power, sub-milliwatt battery operated environment, and how much of it is in circumstances where it's not a wearable device, it's something that has a bigger power budget, it's something that's more part of the infrastructure that has line power? Where do you see the mix of applications between kind of the truly autonomous sensing, wearable, years, last for a year on a battery, and other applications?
Oh, I'm not sure I have a good answer. I think we're looking at the applications we are looking at is in the kind of a wearable space, but also in the industrial space, in automotive, power, energy. So I'm not sure I have a very good answer there. I think it will be across the whole range.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think that the wearable opportunities and certainly show up in the health and safety area. Yeah. So what I would expect that is really part of that distribution. But I'm always working to understand, when you talk about embedded ML, how much of it is in that category versus some of these other things where you have a little bit more resource to play with. But certainly any place that you're concerned about cost and power or throughput. I agree with you on the potential role of accelerators, because they can be orders of magnitude more efficient, at least for the core inference piece of it. But often you have to look at sort of what's the whole application, not just, what did it take to do this one ML function.
But
So
one other area we believe going to happen here is that I think currently, like we said, we have hardware is available. There are number of different platforms available, but where data is kind of the weak point for many customers. So what we are working on is we believe a lot more, and especially together with Infineon. I mean, there are a number of they have a lot of devices connected, and that means that you can actually collect data from real devices, which means that you can do the continuous learning, and then you kind of resolving this problem with the lack of data. You can actually get real world data from devices and then over time really improve the models.
right.
So I think that's also kind of an advantage with the Infineon deal.
Yeah. I can easily imagine that. So I'm also curious to get your observations about the larger market. Set aside what exactly Imagimob is doing. What are the themes that you are following in terms of the evolution of tinyML applications, how customers are thinking about their embedded applications? Are there technologies that you think are coming along that will become important commercially? What do you read from the marketplace about the trends that you must pay close attention to, that you think your customers are paying attention to? To take an extreme example, everyone's talking about ChatGPT. Are your customers asking you questions about how that class of generative AI technology might apply here? Or are their careabouts really going in, being driven by other factors, either in their end application requirements or in the technology that intrigues them?
So I don't know really. I think we have not got questions yet about generative AI.
Okay. Yours has to be the last place where that hasn't come up. It has become such a hype storm across so much of the technology space, even for people who can't spell AI, they know about ChatGPT.
But so a question to you then. So how do you see generative AI fit into the embedded world?
I think relatively slowly, in the sense that if you break it down and you say, okay, what are the categories of generative AI? And it's really defined by these two compelling applications. One, we see image generation, like Stable Diffusion, and you see large language models like ChatGPT. I think that the generative models will have their sweet spot in people who are generating content, because that's what their job is. I think the large language models will play a huge role in user interface, in places where you really want to have conversations, whether you type in your conversations or you speak in the conversations. Just the ability of those models to understand complex prompts and to give very good natural language responses will be quite transformative in places, but it will tend to be in places where you already want to have this high level human interaction, which is language centric, that you'll have sophisticated speech models, or places where you're already handling text. So, in devices with keyboards, devices which are continuously connected to the internet, will be the place where this rolls out. But some of the underlying ideas, this idea that you can absorb and process very long, complex sequences of events. After all, a large language model is just a bigger time series model. And I think that over time, we are likely to see some of those ideas about very complex transformers pre-trained on the masses of data affecting things like fault monitoring in industrial applications and in auto learning, unsupervised learning of human behaviors, for example, in motion sensing. But I think it's going to take actually quite some time for people to translate the lessons of those down there. I don't think that you were going to immediately say, oh yeah, I've got this large language model that runs on my microcontroller. After all, the largest of the models are, take terabytes of memory just to store the model alone. So there's kind of this a bit of a cost and size mismatch. It's a mismatch today that many orders of magnitude. It's not some, if we just made it faster by a factor of 4, we'd be okay. So I think there's a long road, but I think some of the technological ideas will percolate down over time, but not overnight.
I know our development team, they use ChatGPT, they have all subscriptions. When I go have lunch with them, they talk about it all the time. So we definitely, it's really it's really a topic we're discussing. And I know that they're using it for, it can generate code and stuff like that. So, but I don't see it really. No, we're not. Our customers are not asking us about it.
Yeah, well, that was just one example. It's sort of the real question is, what are they talking about? What are the things that they see as being important? What are they worried about?
No, but I think the thing we are discussing with many customers is that kind of the. For instance, how do you get enough data to train the model, and then the need for continuous learning? I think that is something we're discussing with quite a few. Like, the continuous learning is, I would say that's a big topic.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Let me mention to the audience that we're going to shortly start taking some audience questions. So if you have questions, please enter them in the Q&A panel, and I will get to all the appropriate questions. So I've got one question queued up already, but do start adding in what you'd like to hear about from Anders. So there's a question from Stephen. Building on the question of different sensors and different data sets, is there a need for more standardization in this area? What would help in the development of systems where you have a range of sensors and a range of models?
Yes, I think in terms of radar, I think Google actually is working. I think they're working on some kind of standards for that, because that's an area we have a lot of experience, and we can see they all have different formats. They all have, they're very different. In terms of, I think IMUs, it's kind of, that's more simpler. It's kind of more standardized. So in that case, that's easier. But I think if we had more standardized, if data from different sensors look exactly the same, of course that's easier for development, that's easier for training, that's easier for deployment as well.
Right, got it. And what are the other areas of standardization that you think would be helpful? Where do your customers struggle in other parts of their system design as they put this together. I mean, this is sort of, yeah, sensor has to talk to the inference engine. That's one piece of it. But have you found other places where there seems to be some chaos or uncertainty, or lots of effort either by you or by your customers to stitch things together to make the pieces work during the development of the system?
I don't know. When you work, for instance, we worked a lot with AI accelerators, and they're all different. So if you have a model and you want to deploy it on two different AI accelerators, that job is totally different, and there's no similarities between the two. So there could be a need for standardization there, because it's definitely a lot of work to have that working.
Right. Glenn asks the question, how do you see the potential for microcontrollers with neural processing units? What do you think of the ARM offering of M55, which is one of their acceleration units that's being proposed for use in microcontroller platforms?
Yeah, we believe a lot in AI accelerators, and we think in a couple of years that, because it gives so much more performance, yeah, we really believe that will be positive for tinyML.
Yeah, and
we are looking at ARM.
Right. Okay. Does your team have direct experience with M55, or are you just generally speaking about the attraction?
Yeah, we have meetings with them as we speak, but so far we have worked with Cynthian's accelerator and Synaptics.
Okay.
That's what we've done so far.
Yes. Someone asked the question, in your application focus areas, have you come across a need for more cybersecurity hardening for tinyML? What do your customers care about? I mean, medical devices have lots of sensitive data in them. Where does cybersecurity enter into the design?
I think we haven't maybe seen, but we know that, I mean, the division we're connected to in Infineon is the connected secure systems. So I believe that security will be a big application for tinyML.
Yeah, and certainly it's the case that doing more processing at the edge is inherently more secure, because the data that never leaves the patient's body has got to be more secure than something that goes to the cloud wrapped in some encryption. And so using the edge device to get from all of the raw data to just the relevant data that can be shared with the cloud seems to be inherently an advantage from a secure standpoint. Right. Okay. Here's a question from Dale. He asks, extending on your comments on standards, how do you see these edge analytics bidirectionally connected to operational digital twin environments? So do you run across situations of digital twins where you essentially have both a virtual model of what's happening and the live ML system operating with the physical manifestation? So a world in which you think about this pairing between a virtual model and the physical device.
I'm not sure I'm not sure I have a good answer to that, actually.
Okay, that's fine. Let me pull some more on this thread on security and privacy. And as you talk with customers, how big do the questions of privacy, security, responsible AI, how large are those issues in their thinking about what they need to design? Do you run into these questions of, well, how do I know that the training data is sufficient and is unbiased? How do you run into how do you deal with the question of, well, whether the system has enough transparency that they can explain to their users what's going on? There's a whole emerging field of responsible AI that is often a significant education problem, but also has potentially real implications for the design process that you go through or your customers have to go through in order to satisfy the needs of the marketplace for a degree of transparency that satisfies anxieties.
But actually, I think this is an area where our platform is very strong, because our platform is kind of the opposite to a black box. So if you want to do something quick, you can build a model very quickly, you can deploy it. But for the expert developer, he can go deeply into the code, he can see exactly what the layers are doing, the weights and everything. And also in the C code we do for the device, basically it's kind of the source code for the C code. So I think that's part of the it's not really about responsibility, but you can definitely understand what the model is doing. Because it's not like a black box. You can really see what the model is doing. It's not really the answer to that question.
But I think that is important, because I think on the one hand, there is this excitement and paranoia about the growing role of AI in everyone's lives. And depending on your personality type and which application and your past experience, you may shift more towards enthusiasm or more towards paranoia. But how you develop it and how you can explain to your customer, so your customers can explain to their customers what's really going on, is an important part of disarming those fears and allowing for a substantial analysis of what really are the risks associated with it. I mean, if for example, you can show exactly where the training data came from, then people can say, okay, well, that makes it possible for me to assess whether the kind of data that was used for training this actually does correspond to the nature of my users. Because the worry, of course, would be that if it's all trained on one type of data for one kind of person or one kind of scenario, and we're going to use it for a completely different area, and therefore you don't actually know how well it fits. The statistical distribution of your training data and the statistical distribution of your users, if those two distributions get too far apart, you have no idea what the system is going to do. And so transparency is in fact a really important part of it, but it does impose a requirement to communicate in a useful form what are those things that went into to training it and building it and deploying it, so the customers can make some assessment. I think overall, the market is paying much more attention to this question, but how it percolates into enterprise software applications versus consumer products versus industrial products will be quite varied.
But I know for sure that this is something that we, when designing our product, and I know especially now in the next release that is coming out, this is very important. The transparency of the model and the pre-processing and the data and everything. It's kind of an important part.
Yeah, great. Well, we're getting near the end of our hour. There is a poll that Evgeny has put up, and so we invite the the participants to fill out this tiny little survey. But I want to give you, Anders, the last word. What is a key idea that you want this audience to take away about what you're doing or what the future holds?
Well, first, I think for those who are here that are customers, I mean, the technology is here, the hardware platforms are here, the platforms are here, the data is here. So I think it's really the time to start testing, and I believe there are a lot of different applications, maybe not kind of like small applications that just do one simple thing. It doesn't have to be like the big gesture application or something like that. I think tinyML can do a lot of small stuff that's important, but maybe so you cannot really write a press release about it, but they are important. I think there are loads of these applications, and I think that's really why I think for us it's also very interesting to work with Infineon, because they are, of course, a huge company. They have loads of products, they have loads of customers, and of course we will address their customer base with different type of applications, looking for new applications.
Great. Well, I think we're running out of time, and I'm going to hand the microphone back to Evgeny to wrap up.
Well, thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Anders.
And thank you, Anders. I think it's been a great conversation. Obviously, Imagimob has accomplished quite a bit, and we're wishing you all the best with Infineon now. And congratulations again on this next milestone. And I was going to ask you, like, for you personally, what does it mean to be successful? What does it mean for your success? Because we are in the success series, and different people have different inspirations, different meanings. What is it for you?
Well, then I think I can talk from a startup perspective, because that's basically what I mostly have done. But I think if you believe in something, it could be like a concept or a product or an idea, and you're willing to take risk, like financial risk and personal risk, and you're ready to work hard. And in terms of personal risk, I think I know in the US, if you fail, it's kind of it's like it's good to have on your CV, but that's not the way in Sweden. If you fail, it's kind of you fail, and that's bad for you. So when you're running a startup, I would say you take a lot of risk. You take financial risk and you take a personal risk, because when you start, everyone is saying, yeah, you know, that will never work because Google have already done it or Apple have already done it. So, but when you start something, you believe in it, you take the risks, you work hard, and then you realize that customers want your product, big partners want to work with you, and then eventually, if this results in a company that is profitable, or you can make a good exit, then I think that's, for me as a startup person, I think that's, for me, that's a success.
Well, then congratulations on your first phase of success. I'm sure there will be more successes to celebrate with Infineon now. And thank you, Anders, again, and thank you, Chris, for this great conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Anders. That was a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Thank you. And just at the end, let me acknowledge the sponsors again. So this is the list. Executive partners: AgentPulse, Qualcomm, Syntient. Platinum strategic partners are Renaissance, Sony, and then we have Gold, Analog Devices, Adreno, ARM, Infineon. We talked quite a bit about Infineon today. Innovator, Microsoft, SensiML, ST Microelectronics, Synaptics, and then silver sponsors, several companies, including Imagimob here. Thank you again, and we'll see you in a month.